Hi guys, guess what? Today is bottling day of my beer. We are now in my kitchen, so I don't know how the lighting's gonna be. Mr. Echo. How are you, dude? He's being a little clingy, but anyway, so Echo's in here with me, but today's bottling day. It's been a few weeks. I brewed my beer and I let it ferment for a week, and then a week passed and I checked it and the gravity wasn't quite where it should be to finish. So I let it go another week prior to adding the dry hopping. And I checked it again a week later. It still was at the same point. It wasn't going to ferment down any further. So I went ahead and transferred it and I put the 2 ounces of hops in it to dry hop for another week. And so it is now a week after that. I pulled the hops a week ago, Monday or Tuesday, something like that, and I was gonna bottle this beer on like Wednesday, but it just didn't work into my schedule. So now it is another Monday. It's another Monday and we gotta bottle this beer because it is days before I need to deliver it. This beer is from my brother for Christmas, and usually you'd want your beer to be bottled for like 7 to 14 days for it to carbonate, but my brother knows the drill. He can let it sit somewhere warm and let it carbonate in the bottle. But yeah, so today's bottling day, and I will go over all of the stuff that I'm looking at here in my kitchen. All right, let's quickly go over the equipment that we need for bottling day. We have this bottling wand, which goes on the end of the tubing, and it's actually spring activated. And you put it, which I'll get video of this, but you put it into your bottle and you push down and it fills up, and then you pull up and it stops the beer or liquid from coming out. And it also gives you the proper headspace for corks or caps whenever you're bottling. Very much recommend this for anyone who's bottling anything. We have our racking cane with a bucket clip, but the racking cane is what siphons our beer. This little cap goes on the bottom of it and keeps the racking cane above the sediment, so you're not transferring any sediment. Of course, I've already transferred my beer once, so there shouldn't be too much sediment, but it's always a nice safeguard. And all of this has been sanitized. So with a Star San acid-based sanitizer. We have our spoon because we're going to be stirring in priming sugar. Then we have our tubing, which we'll use to transfer the beer, and then also put the bottling wand and bottle the beer. And I use a 6.5 gallon bucket that has a hole for a spigot. So I need a spigot and to use, and usually, so when I transfer my beer, I have to start the suction with my mouth on the end of the tube with the racking cane. But once the beer is in the bottling bucket with the spigot, I don't have to start the suction with my mouth because I can just open this and the siphon will start for me. We have, of course, our bottles, which, because I'm doing this beer for my brother, I got a new case of bottles for his beer, and then just our mishmash of bottles that we've had for who knows how long, just for the extra beer. There's Echo. He is kind of antsy today, so he'll be in and out. But anyway, then we have our caps. These are oxygen barrier caps. They have little hop cones on them because it's an IPA. And then we have our capper here, which is a bench capper, and it makes life easier using leverage to cap your beer. You put your bottle there, which I'll show you, with your cap, and then you push this down on it, and this little bell crimps the cap onto the bottle. And then the only extra ingredient we're using today is priming sugar. which is just corn sugar. And usually, recently, I wouldn't need this whole 5 ounces. I might just throw it in, but you boil this to sanitize it for 5 minutes in 2 cups of water. And then I will be putting the sugar solution in the bottom of this bucket and transfer my beer on top of it so it swirls in. And then the last thing we have is this little reservoir, which has this little pumper. This is full of sanitizer, and it just squirts the sanitizer up into the bottles and makes it so they sanitize. Usually I might have like a bottle tree next to me, but I didn't feel like bringing it upstairs, so I'm just going to put the bottles back into their cases. But yeah, so those are all the things that I need to bottle my beer today. So I did record clips of checking the beer a few times and adding the hops, so I'm gonna go ahead and put those clips in here, and then we'll get to recording the bottling day stuff. All right, it's been over a week. It's now Tuesday. A week and a day later from when I brewed this beer. It's been in my office here, hanging out, and we're gonna check it. There it is. Looks pretty good. As you can see, there's gunk on there. That's normal. Some hop oils in there too. All normal. So what we're gonna do is I have my hydrometer in a test jar. I have it sanitized with a baster, and so I'm going to take out a sample in this test jar, and I'm going to test the gravity. So if it's done, it started at 1.063, so if it's done, it should be probably around like 1.014, maybe 1.012, something like that. So we're going to put the sample in this test jar, and you haven't seen a hydrometer yet, so usually a hydrometer floats on the sugar present in the wort or the must if you're making wine, but because there's no sugar present, this isn't going to float. It's going to drop. It's going to sink because there's no sugar for it to float on, because hopefully our beer is done and everything was made into alcohol. So I'm going to grab the sample and then I will show you what it looks like. All right, this is our sample on my bar here, and I'm just making sure the foam's out of it, so we're getting a good reading. Firstly, let's talk about how gorgeous this color is, though. Like, couldn't have asked for anything better. And then just gonna spin it a little bit. Make sure. So we read the specific gravity. So, and we read at the bottom of the meniscus right there. So we're at like 1.026. So we're actually not done fermenting yet. So I'll have to check it again because it's not done. So it should end in the teens, like 1.010 to 1.014 probably. So she isn't done yet. I haven't seen any bubbling, but she might just be being sluggish right now. So yeah, we're just gonna have to watch it. And yeah, these bubbles, if you can see these bubbles going on, might be holding up my hydrometer, but I think it truly is just not completely fermented out yet. So yeah, we'll have to continue to let it ferment for us before we transfer it, so we don't lose any yeast cells. And also It does smell fantastic, by the way. It smells like an IPA already, but I still have another stage of dry hopping to do after we transfer it, but that's that step. I'm gonna actually pour this sample into a glass and taste it, and then probably won't show that, but then we'll do another reading in a few days and see if it's dropped any. Hi guys, it's been 2 weeks since I brewed my beer. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And I checked it a week ago and it wasn't ready. And it actually looks like it still isn't done. So, yeah, it looks like this beer is just gonna stop at 1.0, a little over 1.02, 1.024 maybe. Which, you know what? It was like that a week ago, so I think I'm just gonna go ahead and call it. And we're going to, there's the beer. Going to transfer it into a new bucket and then put the hops in, the dry hops, and let it sit for another 2 weeks with the dry hops in there. But let me tell you, it tastes fantastic. It's not even carbonated, obviously, it's just fermented, and it tastes absolutely fantastic. So yeah, we're gonna transfer it into a new bucket, get it off of the sediment, which I'll show you the sediment, and get it dry hops in there. And also I have in this little like juice glass, I have a hop or a grain bag in some sanitizer that I'm gonna put my hops in, because the hops expand whenever they're wet, and the husks will be everywhere if I don't contain them in a bag. So I have my bag sanitized. Everything is sanitized using Star San sanitizer as usual. And then yeah, this is my sample of beer, which I'll probably go ahead and drink. It smells fantastic. It smells like an IPA, and it tastes good now. It's a little sweet because it didn't ferment out as far as it could have, but I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it. And then it's gonna taste even better once we get those dry hops in there. So on to transferring it. All right, I have my siphon situated, and this one is just a normal racking cane with a tube into a clean sanitized bucket, and I have to use my mouth to start it. But whenever you ferment anything, wine or beer, you want to siphon it out. You don't want to pour it once it's fermented, because the oxygen when pouring can bruise the flavor of your final product. So you don't want to oxidize your product. So you siphon it using either a racking cane and a tube, or just a tube, or an auto siphon. But yeah, so I'm going to start the siphon and I'll show you it going into the bucket. So I started my siphon, and this racking cane actually has a little black cap on the bottom of it because there's a layer of hop gunk on the bottom, and if I push it down a little bit, you can see it starts to change color there because it's in that gunk, which we don't want. So but here it is being transferred, and I got a little gunk in there. I got a little excited, but yeah, we're siphoning it into the clean bucket, and then I will put the hops in it. Now, usually when I transfer a beer into the secondary, I would add a fining agent, gelatin finings, especially because I wasn't good at transferring and I got some of that extra yeast gunk on the bottom. But usually I would add gelatin finings in this step if I weren't going to let it sit for 7 more days, because I like to have clear beer, and that's just a teaspoon of gelatin finings, which is like Knox gelatin, and you let it soak for like 20 minutes in a cup of cold water, and then heat it to 180 degrees on the stove. And usually I would just pour it on top of my newly transferred beer. But because this is going to be sitting for an extra 7 days with the Amarillo and Cascade in it, I actually am not going to do a fining agent just because gravity will take its course. But yeah, at this time I would usually, after it's done transferring, put a fining agent in, just so I can have some clear beer. But also this has already been sitting extra week because I was letting it trying to see if it will ferment out anymore, and it didn't. So even though I have gotten some gunk in there, which I could still get gunk in there because we're getting down to the we're getting down to the bottom, but I just don't feel like doing the gelatin finings because it will have time to clear on its own. As you can see, there's the hop gunk, or the yeast gunk. That's as I'm tipping this bucket, it's like making its way toward the bottom of my siphon there. All right, now that it's done, I tried to do my best to get no yeast gunk transferred, but after 9 years, I still am not the best at transferring. But yeah, there's your yeast dirt. It's probably like a few inches deep. And then we have like the yeast gunk on the side of the bucket there. Now some people actually would harvest this and wash it and reuse it for future batches, but I just toss it. I just put it down the drain. And it's the one time I brewed a chocolate peanut butter porter and the yeast gunk smelled like pudding. And so I tried it, and oh, it was salty. It was so gross. Do not recommend it. But this is actually what, for those of you in Australia or in England, this is what Vegemite or Marmite is made out of. This gunk, they like, I don't know what they do to it, but this is what those are made out of. So I can kind of understand what it tastes like, though I've never had it. But this is the yeast gunk that those products are made out of. All right, we got our grain bag of the Cascade and Amarillo, an ounce of each, and we're just gonna plop her in there, and it'll just steep in there at room temperature for a week. Now, like I've made the mistake of putting hops in there without a bag before, and they opened up and there were husks everywhere, and it clogged my racking cane, and I had a terrible time transferring because my racking cane kept getting clogged. I've also made the mistake of forgetting to sanitize the grain bag before whenever I added mint into a beer, and that caused a mold to form. So definitely always make sure to sanitize your bags if you're gonna add them into the secondary. I use Star San sanitizer. Sometimes I'll just dunk them in some whiskey or vodka or something just to kill off any bacteria. But yeah, our hops are just gonna hang out in there for a week. Again, these hops are just gonna give us flavor because there's no boiling going on. They're not gonna give us any bitterness like they would in the boil. And after they sit for a week in there, I will see you when it's time to bottle. All right, so because my beer didn't ferment out completely, I actually decided to go ahead and put my beer into a carbonation calculator because there might be a few extra yeast cells and I don't want my bottles to blow up. So I put my beer into a carbonation calculator and it said to use 4.12 ounces of corn sugar rather than a full 5 ounces. So I'm gonna go ahead and just measure that out. And like a few years ago, 5 ounces was perfectly fine for like all beers. But something changed. I don't know if the corn sugar changed or what, or they just got better at calculating carbonation in beer. But we no longer use 5 ounces per 5 gallons. So we use fewer than 5 ounces, even though the packets are divvied out into 5 ounces. But yeah, so obviously it's not 4.1, but it's close enough. And hopefully this will keep my bottles from exploding, because that's definitely not what I want. Now I'm going to go put this in boiling water and let it boil for 5 minutes. Again, just to dissolve the sugar, but also to sanitize it since we're putting it in to our finished product. So we're going to pour the sugar water in the bottom of my bucket here. And then here's our beer. Hello! There's a few little bubbles and some hop oil on the top of it, but it smells fantastic. We're going to transfer our beer on top of the hot sugar water, so the swirling of the beer on top of it will mix the sugar water in. But of course, we're still going to use the spoon here to stir it. So I will show you that in a minute. All right, we got our beer transferring in there, and it's nice and clear. I have, there's a little gunk, but that's fine. I have it right on the bottom, so it's actually pretty nice as I just try not to bump it. But yeah, it's pretty nice and clear as it's going down into our bucket here, and then our bucket clip here securing our racking cane. Make sure it's not gonna fall or slide and cause gunk to be kicked up everywhere. And it looks like I did a good job at securing the spigot. We don't have any leaking or anything going on, because I have made that mistake where I was transferring a stout and I went downstairs to grab something and I came back and there was like a gallon of stout on the floor because I forgot to close my spigot. So definitely double check that. But yep, our beer's transferring nicely, and then once it's done transferring, we'll stir in the sugar and then we're ready to bottle. All right, our wine, yes, our beer has been transferred and it's still not leaking, which is good. But I'm gonna stir in the sugar here, and then actually let me show you. So there was still some gunk from the last time that I transferred it, because I'm not very good at transferring. But we left a bunch of it behind. And in the bottle, actually, no matter how well you transfer your beer, in the bottle, because whenever you add priming sugar, it feeds whatever few yeast cells are left, right? And so the yeast are eating the sugar that you've just introduced, and is making CO2, which tries to escape, but because you bottled it, it can't escape, so it goes back down into your beer and carbonates your beer. But because the yeast is eating the sugar, it's creating yeast dirt, and so it will fall on the bottom of your bottle, and there'll be a nice thin layer of yeast sediment in your bottle. All right, so I have, because this is for my brother, I have his bottles lined up because they're my priority to fill, and then I'll add my mismatched bottles later. And then we have our beer up there with the tubing and the wand ready to go, and then I just go down the line and fill them up, and then I will cap them, but I will get situated and show you how I fill the bottles. Alright, so the bottles for my brother have been filled, and then this is just an extra one to hold the hose in place. But I'm now gonna cap his bottles, which I have the caps in some sanitizer right now, and as I said earlier, they're hop cones, but they have an oxygen barrier, this little like silicone ring in there, which helps keep the oxygen out and helps keep the beer longer in the bottle. But cute little hop cones. here's the capper. There's Echo. But here's the capper, and I will show you how we do it. We have a friend, but you put your bottle there. Put your bottle cap on the bottle, and then just bloop, and then your cap's on there. And this has a magnet. Actually, I don't know if it does anymore, but it used to have a magnet. But yep, that's how I cap them. Some people use a wing capper, but this is far easier using leverage that way. All right, once the beer is bottled, it now needs to go somewhere that's about room temperature, 68 to 70 degrees, to carbonate, because like I said earlier, the sugar in there, the yeast cells are going to eat the sugar and make CO2, and then the CO2 will go back down into the beer, and it needs to be warm enough for that to happen. So I'll probably put this in my office, but they usually need to sit for 7 to 14 days to carbonate. Of course, the longer they're in the bottle, the better the beer will be, because it has time to mellow out. So I would recommend doing the 14 days, but if you're pushing it, 7 days usually does the trick. It just will get better over time. Now for an IPA like this, I would probably try to drink it as quickly as possible. IPAs have lots of fresh hop flavors, and over time those can stale. And so a year after this beer has been bottled probably won't be as good as when it's fresh, but there are other beers that actually get better with age, like a red ale, a cream ale, probably a brown or ale or a stout. But with this particular beer, I probably wouldn't save it for more than a year. Probably drink it within the first 6 months if possible. Obviously, it's not gonna kill you if you have it over the year. I've kept beer for 5+ years. After 5 years though, it does start to get a little funky in the sense that it's oxidizing. It's just not holding the flavor that it once did when it was a younger beer. But yeah, because this is an IPA, it's just better for the hop freshness to drink it young. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna leave this in my office to let it carbonate. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. I figured since I showed my brew day and what that entailed, that I should probably show the steps that come after the brew day. So I wanted to make sure to show you that journey, and I gotta thank you guys so much for the feedback on that brew day video. I was very excited to share my hobby. I love teaching my hobby, and the comments and the feedback on that was so heartwarming, and I appreciate it so much, and I'm glad that you guys found it very interesting and educational, because that's all I wanted it to be. And so I couldn't be more happy with how that one turned out and how well it was received. I hope you have enjoyed watching this one and seeing the next steps in the process. The beer currently in its uncarbonated state tastes really good, and I'm sure it'll taste even better after it's had time to sit in the bottle and carbonate. I will probably let you know, maybe show pictures or something of me cracking one open on my community tab here on YouTube. But thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye.